Welcome to this week's episode of the Campfire Series podcast. I am your host, Logan Soforenko. We have a very special guest joining us today, Broadway veteran, Ahmad Simmons.
I'm Ahmad Simmons. I'm based here in New York City. I am a Broadway performer, creative producer, dancer, teacher, all those things.
What are some recent credits that you've had on Broadway?
Yeah, so before the shutdown, you could have seen me on stage in West Side Story, the most recent revival of West Side Story that Ivo Van Hove helmed. And before that, I was in a show called Hadestown and did Carousel and Cats before those shows. Yeah.
So you've been in some relatively dance-heavy shows. Let's start off kind of through the resume, I guess. You were in Cats for a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your time with Cats.
Yeah, so Cats was my Broadway debut. We opened that in 2016. That was fun. It was, I was very green. It was my first experience here on Broadway. So super, super eager, lots of energy, lots of super raw things happening there. But it was a great experience. I did it for about a year and a half before I transitioned out of it. But yeah, it taught me the ropes, I would say. Cats did, in terms of what to expect of my body, what to expect of people around me, the industry, the day-to-day, the schedule, the city, living in the city with that kind of schedule and that kind of life. So yeah, really, it taught me the ropes, showed me the ropes there. And then after that, I moved on to Carousel, which is a totally different experience, but equally as rewarding.
When you moved on to when you move on to Carousel, you were with Tony Award choreographer Justin Peck. Amazing choreography. Tell us a little bit about that choreography and just about your time with Carousel.
Yeah, well, the cool thing about what Justin did with Carousel, Justin is a resident choreographer of City Ballet here, and so his vocabulary is definitely more classically based than what I was doing in Cats. And it was really great to sort of switch gears with my body and style. But I was able to do a lot of developmental labs, choreography labs with Justin about a year and a half actually before we even landed on stage. I was in the studio working with him, making the steps for what would be the production. So his style, at first I was intimidated, I would say, by it, thinking of where he's coming from for the City Ballet and thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm no principal dancer at the ballet. What is this going to be like? But surprisingly, a lot of his work is more human, and the intention behind it actually drives a lot of it. So his style and the aesthetic of it is actually not always first in a classical sort of methodology. It's more story based, and that's what I found working with him in the studio. So it got rid of that intimidation phase and really just into like what this character was trying to do, or what these sailors are trying to do, the tasks of being on the boat, like that kind of thing turned into movement rather than thinking, oh, I have to put this classical body on me, I have to put this classical vernacular on me and make it into something that I'm not. It was totally opposite from that. So it was great. So once that intimidation wore off and I kind of found some ground in it, it became really enjoyable, and it taught me a lot. It did.
And most recently you're in West Side Story, but prior to that production, you were in the Broadway cast of Hadestown the musical, and you also were the first original cast member to depart and go do another project. So tell us a little. First of all, I'd love to hear a lot about Hadestown. I even interviewed your former castmate Kimberly Marable. She and it's very cool hearing about that show because a lot of my friends introduced me to it, and I didn't really know much about it. So I started following your journey. I watched you on Broadway Sandwich on YouTube, uh, and I just fell in love with the show. So I'm sure you did as well. So tell us a little bit about Hadestown, and also how you got involved right when they cast the Broadway cast. 'Cause I know it had a run before New York and stuff.
Right. They'd gone over to London with it. Hadestown was a long, long journey before it even got to Broadway, before it even got to New York. I mean, it's been like 13 years in the making. But I actually got involved with Hadestown through another developmental sort of choreography lab that happened. Gosh, what was that? A year, the summer before they went out to do it in the National. I think they premiered at the National in like January. Um, the summer before I was called in, I auditioned to be a part of this lab. They didn't have any ensemble in the show when it was downtown. So all of the principals were the ensemble, were the workers. So they decided when they were going to go to Broadway or London first that they wanted to add, they wanted to lift it up and add ensemble so they could push the story, the atmosphere, all of that more. So anyway, they were trying to see where the ensemble could fit in choreographically, within the story. And so I joined them there actually, and that was for about 2 weeks where we played with. We did "Come Home with Me." We did some of the underground stuff. We did "Living It Up on Top," and then they went away. Then I had started the West Side Workshop, um, and they were going off to London. They came back and they had another round of auditions, and I was like, well, I would really love to do the show. I'd fallen in love with everybody, the music, the cast, and that workshop. And I was like, okay, I have to do this show. This has to be my next show. And West Side and Hadestown were kind of happening at the same time in terms of workshops and deciding. But anyway, I ended up, going back in for Hadestown, um, and booking it for the cast here, while I was doing workshops with West Side. So they really kind of overlapped. So that's the only reason I left Hadestown to do West Side, because I had already been involved with West Side at the same time while they were in London. So it was a lot of crossover there. But yeah, I mean, Hadestown is a super special show. I was sad to leave so soon. But that 6 months really did fulfill me and my life there. And um, I mean, the legacy of that show is gonna outlive us all. So it'll be cool to see where it goes. And I'd always go back.
Well, you told us a little bit about how you got cast, or how the creative process of West Side Story. Tell us a little bit about the rehearsal process. I know it's kind of a modern, more modern twist. The costumes are a little bit different. I noticed everyone's got tattoos. Like, tell us a little bit about the newer style of this production at the Broadway Theater. At the Broadway Theater.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, they were tasked with bringing West Side to the 21st century. That was the overall task for the whole creative team, for everybody. That's what they wanted to do. What's beautiful about West Side is that the music always crosses over. It's so timeless, and even the choreography is iconic and timeless. But they wanted to put it on bodies today so that it would reflect what you see out, in the city today and the issues we face today. And so that's why you see such a modern take in terms of costuming and tattoos and the staging, how bare it is. But I think, you know you still have the meat of the story. The original story is still there. So you don't really miss that much. We did cut a few songs. Um, I Feel Pretty's cut, and the Somewhere ballet is cut. Um, all to keep the engine moving forward. They were working with this very like cyclic thing, this brewing, this vortex of energy throughout the whole show. And so to break that, for them would have been detrimental. So that's why it's so fast, and that's why there's no intermission. Um, but yeah, I mean, it does feel like today. Definitely feels like you come off of the street, you go in, and you don't feel like you're in a totally different land. Um, it feels more familiar to you, which I love about it. It's more immediate.
How different is it to do a show with no intermission as opposed to a show that does, and especially when like yourself, you're a heavy dancer, and I don't know too much about the choreography for this production. Like I don't know if it's demanding or not, but what's it like? It's intense, yeah.
Yeah, the choreography for our West Side is very, very demanding physically, and there's so many different elements. Without giving it away, I don't know if you want to know, but there's so many different. Evo is super into elements of nature, like being on the stage, and so there's a lot of that we're dealing with as well. So it's taxing. So that, on one hand, I miss the intermission because a lot of the times that you're a little bit of recovery, um, and rev up for the next act to finish the show. But with this show, I think if you sit too long, your body will lose it. So as hard as it is, it's actually I prefer West Side with no intermission, um, to just kind of barrel through the experience and then have a long break afterwards. But yeah, it depends. Hadestown wasn't super dance heavy, so going from Carousel, which was, to Hadestown was already sort of a break for me, in terms of dancing and physically. So then, back to West Side, where it's like heavy, heavy dance is something I had asked the universe for. I was like, oh, I want to dance again, and then I got it. I got it like 100-fold.
Tell me a little bit about the process of putting a show like this together, like when it comes to the rehearsal process, because as opposed to a lot of high school and high schoolers, their rehearsal process for their musicals are really long, and then college it gets shorter, and then when you get to Broadway, they're what, 3 or 4 weeks. What's that rehearsal process like to put a really big show together?
The typical rehearsal process, I would say, would be 4 to 6 weeks, for a show. That's 4 weeks, and then you do 2, 3 weeks of tech, I'd say, and then you're on. You have your preview period. But Hadestown was a shorter period because they had already been in London working out all the kinks, most of the kinks. So it was just a matter of transferring the show to the Cur. So that process was really fast. I feel like that was like a 5 week process. West Side was super long. We had 7 weeks of previews alone, 6 weeks of rehearsal, a couple weeks of tech because of all of the screens and all of that element. So it varies. It's not the same for each process actually, but I think a minimum of 4 weeks, you could say, of rehearsal for every show, and then depending on how much stuff you have to do in tech, that'll extend that time, and preview period varies for sure. Um, yeah, so it's not a one size fits all type situation, but there's a minimum, I would say, of 4 weeks.
Where did you train? Like, did you go to college, and did you go to like classes and all that kind of stuff?
I went to Point Park University. There, I got a BFA in dance actually there, but I performed with the Pittsburgh CLO in the summers. So every summer I would do their summer stock shows as my sort of musical theater education component to college. So it was really just learning on the job for me, um, since I wasn't really able to do a lot of that within my degree. But prior to that, I went to a performing arts school. So fifth through 12th grade, I was at a performing arts high school, or middle and high school. So that's where it all really started for me.
When it comes to, let's just say, coronavirus never happened, the pandemic, we don't have a shutdown, Broadway's still going. Where do you see the trajectory of? I know West Side Story was open for a little bit, good, and would you see the show going? Into summer, into the Tony season, all that kind of stuff.
If it was still running, yeah. Okay, so I learned a lot from this show actually. I learned a lot about how to create something from the ground up when there's already a template there, how to be daring, how to be risky, what it means to have a successful collaboration, what it means to barrel through issues, what it means to ignore things. I mean, I learned a ton behind the table, but as a performer, you know, I think the biggest thing for me with West Side is just learning the limits of my body in this one, even more, and what that means for me, what I want to get out of it, and um, it was sort of putting me on a trajectory of coming out of really heavy dance things. Like this really would have been my last, I would say, super heavy dance ensemble show, and going more into roles and different avenues of creating my own opportunities. Um, but that's still sort of happening anyway. I'm making it happen without being in the show right now, which is nice. But yeah, so I guess West Side was one that was setting me up for a new sort of life in the theater. And I'm just having to do that without going to work 8 times a week.
And it's you said it's setting you up. I mean, this is after 4 shows on Broadway, so that's pretty awesome. You know what I mean? But also, let's flash back to Hadestown real quick, because I remember you were also understudied Orpheus, and you had to learn a whole new instrument. Tell us a little bit about that process, real quick.
Well, I'd never played guitar before having to understudy Orpheus, and I play piano. I grew up playing piano, and so in my auditions initially, when they were first auditioning for Orpheus understudies, you didn't have to play the guitar. So for me, I played the piano as I was singing the epics in my audition tapes. So just accompanying myself on the piano, and then um, when I got cast as the understudy, I got cast as the understudy for Hermes first, and then they were looking for an Orpheus understudy, and it was like, "Oh, we want to have you sing it again." So then I went in and sang the epics and If It's True and some things for the creative team, and then they gave me that and was like, "Okay, so we're just gonna teach you how to play the song." Um, so it was fun though. I mean, I enjoyed it. I probably couldn't play them now for you because it's been so long, but I enjoyed it. I only ever performed the role in understudy rehearsal because, and once I sang All I've Ever Known with one of the other understudies at a conference. But, because Reeve had never called out of a show. So, nobody ever went on for him. But, which I'm not mad about because that role is tough. And it like definitely required me to put my voice in a completely different spot than where it naturally lives, which you can hear is low. So having to deal with that falsetto and that sort of mixing up there was a totally different voice that it took being in it and rehearsing it all the time to get my voice there, and then getting my hands to play without looking as I'm singing on the turntable. Like that was a great learning experience. Super scary, but yeah, so it only lived in understudy rehearsal.
You mentioned the turntables. What was working on those turntables like? Because I think the Walter Kerr is a perfect size for a show like Hadestown. And it's just very intimate. But also for you as the actors, you guys were on those turntables, and it's pretty heavy staging. What was that like as a performer? Also marking it in rehearsal and then carrying it over into the show.
Yeah, in rehearsal, we were very aware of where the turntables, um, when they would start, what direction they're going, when they stop, which step you're on when they start, which step you're on when they stop, So so translating it to the stage was actually pretty easy because we had already been rehearsing with that in mind. But you still can't be prepared for the jerk of it, in tech when it stops unexpectedly or goes a little faster than you thought it would, or so things like that definitely happen. And in performance too, it's you have humans pressing the cues. It's not robots, so sometimes they're a little late, sometimes they're we so having to adjust to that, you have to always sort of be alert with that. But it's actually pretty fun. It's a pretty fun thing, to work with turntables. I'd
Looks
do it
it.
again. Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Obviously the role of being on Broadway. You know, so many people want to be on Broadway. People want to land a tour. People want to just get there, but don't realize how taxing it really is doing it 8 times a week and really only having one full off day. Like off, and sometimes you may not even have that. But you've been through 4 shows. Throughout that journey, what have been some things that you've done to take care of yourself physically and mentally performing 8 times a week?
Yeah. Yeah, people do forget it's a job for sure, and that, you know, the glory of it is always there. It's always going to be there because it's the greatest stage. It's the highest stage, and that never gets old, and you never get tired of sharing with an audience every night. That give and take, just it's energizing and inspiring. But like I said, it's a job, so from 5, 6 to 10 every night, you have to be at your highest ability. You have to be, completely present. And so it's different. Everybody has their own way of getting to that presence. Um, for me, it changes almost every day. Some days I need to not see people, not talk, not this, and then I'm ready for the show. Some days I do want to go and have a workout, have a class, and then go to the show. Some days I need a long walk in the park to get my mind right, and then I'll do a little warm up, and then I'll be ready for the show. So there's no I I haven't found a formula that I just stick to. It depends on what I need that day when I wake up, and then that changes per show. For something like Cats, when you're going to be using your body all day, I may not want to work out because I don't want to exhaust my quads before I know I have to be on a rake all night. So it's different depending on what's required of you. Hadestown was a little different for me. I could have a full life um, before going to the theater because I know I can continue having that life on stage. You know, so it's different. I guess West Side though, I trained a lot for West Side in terms of like my body to try and get my body bulked up and strong and all of that for the character because I thought you needed to be that. So that was a big component of my preparation for West Side. That's all gone away now, but uh, but yeah, it's different. It's different for every show.
When it comes to, you've had, like I said earlier, you had the privilege of being on a couple Tony Award performances. What's that? No one really knows about the rehearsal process for that because you're doing your 8 show week as well as doing those kind of rehearsals. What's that like? Also, like how exciting is that for you? But also, how tiring is it for you?
Oh, it's tiring, but it's still so exciting. I mean, it's the Tony Awards. It's something you grew up watching. So yeah, nobody tells you that you have the early morning dress rehearsal or the camera blocking or that you do your matinee first and then you're bused to do the Tonys. But it's still so exciting. I mean, that's like the Super Bowl for theater. And you're with everybody you've watched on TV, on stage, you've grown up watching, you've grown up loving. Like you're all, especially if you get the chance to be in the opening number, it's everybody together, so you're feeling like, oh, these are real people, this is a real community. So yeah, you're exhausted. That's one of the hardest weeks you'll do on Broadway, but it's amazing.
What's been one of your favorite theaters you've performed in? I'm sure you probably don't have a favorite, but because I'm sure each one rings different, truth and has a special place in your heart.
I do have a favorite
You
so
do?
far.
Oh,
The
good.
Cur is my favorite so far
Mm.
that I've performed in because it's so intimate. There's not a bad seat in the Cur. And it just like that, and the set of our show, I guess, of Hadestown like pulled you in. But I don't like the Broadway I love, but it's massive. You can miss a lot. The Imperial was beautiful. It's, a lot of legendary shows there. But yeah, I think I love the Cur. That's been my favorite so far.
Before we kind of wrap up, what's some advice you can give to young actors? High school, college, maybe even middle school. What's just some advice you can give? You have some experience under your belt, so what's some stuff you can give us?
My biggest advice that I'm telling people now, especially while things are shut down, is we don't know what theater's going to look like when we come back. We can hope, we can dream, we can pretend to know, we can take all the master classes we want, all the master classes I'm offering that we're teaching. But at the same time, it's like the most important thing right now for anybody is to know yourself. So that you can come into the business and the industry fully prepared to like ride the wave of whatever is coming next. Like get rid of the expectation of like, oh, this is the track I'm going to be, like this is the type I am, and this is what I'm an alphaba, I'm a this, like that doesn't exist anymore. Because like now is the time where everybody has to know exactly who they are to bring that to whatever this landscape is going to look like. So invest in yourself right now. Learn what you like. What are your interests past just the book of songs? How can you present more of yourself than an idea of what you think theater wants from you? I would say it's the most important thing right now, because then you're just prepared. You can stand on anything with that.
I don't think that could have been said any better. I think it's a perfect way of saying, finding a way to,
Yeah.
or figuring out how to know yourself. Because I feel like a lot of us right now are struggling with that idea. Because earlier the months we're like, when will this thing be over? And now we're accepting that it's not going to be over for a while. So now we really have to take time to really invest in ourselves and know what to
Yeah, it's important.
Well, Ahmad, I really appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on the show. I want to wish you the best of luck, like with your master classes and with everything you're doing right now to benefit the theater community. And also, I follow your Instagram, and I really appreciate you using your platform as well as a voice. And I've learned so much through this time period. And I really appreciate you as a performer. And I'm really looking forward to see West Side Story when you guys are back.
Thanks. Yeah. Oh gosh, I would love to have you there. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You take care, stay safe, and I'll see you at the Broadway, hopefully when we're back.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was nice meeting you.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's episode. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow us on Instagram at Campfire Series Podcast for awesome updates and just a good time. We'll see you next week. I'm Logan Soforenko, signing off.